I'm more than pro-Palestinian because Palestinians are my cousins. They're my family. Right? I'm pro-human life, but Palestinians are in even closer degree closer to me. But it's now being used as we're going to pretend to care about the Palestinian in order to really fulfill our goal and our agenda, which is to attack the Jewish people and delegitimize our connection to our homeland.
You keep saying that Palestinians are your cousins.
Yes.
Walk me through that logic. I don't see a lot of Jews or Muslims, for that matter, or Arabs saying, my family, my mishbucha, I love you, I miss you. I see a lot of, I kill you, please don't. Like, walk me through that. Your family is from where originally?
So originally every Jew is from Israel. We were displaced 2,000 years ago. Some of us stayed in the land, and we had different diasporic experiences. Part of my family went to North Africa, to Algeria and Morocco. The other part of my family survived the Holocaust in Poland and Belgium, leading to my parents both being born in France, me being born in France. But wherever we are as Jews, the reason we're called Jews is because we were kicked out from a land called Judea. It is not our religion, it's the portable version of our ancient civilization. And so as Jews, we come from Judea, aka Israel. As Israelites, this is where we're from, this is where our culture was born, rooted to, and belongs to. Now, Palestinians, first of all, Arabs in general are our cousins. Sem, we were talking about Semitic. Sem is a person, he's the child of Noah. Now, the descendants of Sem are the Semites who are living in the Middle East. So all Middle Easterners are part of this Semitic family. Today, the word Semitic is really talking about a language, a Semitic language. So Arabic, Amharic, Hebrew, Arabic, all sorts of languages that are Semitic languages. Now, specifically the Palestinians, what's fascinating is that 30 to 60% of them in total descend from Jews that were converted to Christianity and Islam over time. And if you go to places like Haifa, Jerusalem, Yafo, Yatta, Safed, Tzfat, Shechem, Hebron, places that are actually ancient Jewish villages, 80 to 90% of their DNA is Jewish DNA. So it's more than just an Arab-Jewish cousin relationship. We're even closer to them. And so once we start understanding that, we no longer see each other as outsiders. Many Jews that are, let's say, on the far right will look at Palestinians and say, oh, you guys are a bunch of foreign Arabs who've come and poured into the land and you don't belong here. And many extremist Palestinians will say, oh, well, the Jews are a bunch of fake white Europeans who've come from the outside. But once we understand that historically, genetically, linguistically, culturally, archaeologically, anthropologically, we descend from the same roots, it's much harder to reject one another.
But do you think people, I guess, to put it bluntly, care about that? Meaning, okay, great, you all came from the same place, the biblical Moses, Abraham, they're like, yeah, but what about today? There's a, like, do you think those protesters care about what he just asked, what he just said?
The protesters aren't going to be monolithic. I'm sure there's going to be people that actually agree with a lot of what he just said. There's going to be dissenting opinions. I think you'd probably see a lot of ideological diversity within this movement if you went up to each individual protester and asked them their thoughts and feelings. I wouldn't want to like give a blanket statement and speak for any like protests as a whole. Protesters as a whole, I think they'd have to articulate that themselves.
So there's being idealistic and like, I would love, like, would you say that you're idealistic? Like, meaning, like, I believe that we can all get along and live together one day.
I would say that every person that changed history was idealistic and was told that they were idealistic and utopian by people who didn't believe so. And because they didn't listen to them, they changed history.
Got it. So there's idealistic and realistic.
Correct.
I don't want to have a whole conversation about 1948 and then the Israeli independence and then the war of 1948 and then 1967 and the border and the 70s. I don't want to go there. But how realistic is it, especially with Hamas, a known terrorist organization, the Hezbollah, just to the north of Israel, the Houthi rebels in the Red Sea, Iran with their tentacles everywhere, how realistic that Israel will ever have peace in that region, especially with Gaza and the West Bank and Hamas running the show there? How realistic is it? Give me like 2% chance, 1% chance, 50%. What is realistic in the next 20 to 40 years?
Well, that it will eventually find a solution 100%. The question is how long, and it will depend on what we do. You know, if we had this conversation before 48, a lot of people would say, well, how realistic is it that a Jewish state will re-exist back on their ancient homeland? And a lot of people denied that that was a possibility, and yet it's here. Or how will Israel survive? Or how will we ever have peace with Egypt? Nasser was the head against Israel and the creation of Israel, leading the entire Arab world, and yet this country now has peace with Israel. Jordan has peace with Israel. The Emirates have peace with Israel. Saudi Arabia might soon have peace with Israel. Maybe even Lebanon in our very near future after the war with Hezbollah might have peace with Israel. So things can change, but we need to go to the source. Now, Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. yes, there are many Palestinians who support Hamas, but Hamas does not represent the Palestinians. They are on their 18th year of their 4-year term. If we look at Hezbollah does not represent the Lebanese people. Yes, you'll find many Lebanese who agree with that, but these groups are those who are controlling them, dominating them, and giving them horrible lives, and they are the ones who are causing the problem. So I like to separate Hamas from the Palestinians, and if I look towards a future with Palestinians included in that future with Israelis, it does not include Hamas, of course.
Okay. I want to sort of put a ribbon on the student protest thing. You know, you said that it's not monolithic, that they're not necessarily anti-Israel, they're anti-war, right? Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. It's not the only war that's going on in the world, and it's certainly not the only war that's going on in the region. There's been the war in Yemen. There's been the war in Syria.
Sudan.
There's been a war in Sudan. There's been Lebanese conflict with... Why don't I see any other protests on any other campus? Afghanistan, Iraq, what's going on in Iran. Iran is going to put to death a rapper right now. We'll talk about that. Zero protests. Zero. We'll play this clip by Joe Scarborough. Why do you think it's only the Israel protests?
Well, I think the reason why is because people are uncomfortable with the fact that 34,000 Palestinians have died in Gaza so far. Over 25,000 have been women and children.
Okay.
And when they see their government, the USA, directly supporting, aiding, and abetting this onslaught in Palestine and Gaza specifically, they're very uncomfortable by that. You know, like you can look at different, areas of conflict within the world globally, but the first question you have to ask yourself is like, is my government supporting that? Do I have a say over that? Like, for example, I don't have a say over the Uyghur genocide in China, right? My government's not directly funding that, but the United States is an ally to Israel, one of the biggest allies to Israel, and we are providing weapons, we're providing aid, and we are helping assist them in this. And I think that's what makes people particularly uncomfortable, and why in this moment people feel like it's important to seize upon all the public attention that's directed towards this conflict and try to channel it into something positive.
Fair enough. I'm going to show you this clip, and I want you to respond to this, but do you know who the biggest provider of funds to the Palestinians are?
Maybe Qatar?
America. Do you know this stat?
Oh, with aid?
With aid.
Sure.
So, the running joke is we're providing bombs to Israel, but also food to the Palestinians. It's a very dicey conflict. Would you at least be willing to acknowledge Hamas is a terrorist group and they have to go?
I would agree that Hamas is a terrorist group, and I would agree that I don't believe that they're a good steward for Palestinian autonomy leadership. Okay. I think they're a brutal resistance group, and I think Palestinians deserve better than that. But I will say, just as a matter of principle, if I'm interested in seeing Palestinian statehood, Palestinian sovereignty, I do believe that Palestinians have to be able to make the choice who their leaders are going to be. But given the recent polling, Hamas doesn't enjoy that much support from Palestinians whatsoever. So I find it very, very unlikely that they're going to be reelected.
What are the approval ratings for Hamas in Palestine and Gaza these days? I think it's pretty high.
There's no even election to begin with. I mean, there was one election, and at that time, Hamas was running on a very different campaign than what it is today. In fact, it was presenting itself as better than Fatah, which is what the Palestinian Authority is, and that they'd be more.
That's Mahmoud Abbas's party?
Yeah, Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, and that they'd be more willing to engage with Israel. Actually, many Israeli politicians were supporting the idea that Hamas would take over because it would be finally something new that we could negotiate with. And then Hamas turned to what it was. So even the fact that Hamas was elected to begin with, I don't think we could go retroactively and say, oh, well, it proves that Palestinians truly wanted what eventually Hamas done. Also, there are many polls that talk about how Palestinians approve of Hamas. We have to understand there's no freedom of speech in Gaza. If you say something against Hamas, you disappear. So if someone is going around asking Palestinians in Gaza, what do you think about Hamas, with Hamas militants next to them, they're probably going to say that they approve of Hamas. So I think even the polls are not accurate to represent what the people have. I think being in Gaza a few months ago, I know that Palestinians, for the most part in Gaza, are now rejecting of Hamas, seeing what they've done, seeing how they've treated their own civilians while they were living there, seeing the destruction that they've caused with what happened on October 7th and afterwards. So I say overall, the Palestinians in Gaza are mostly rejecting Hamas. That doesn't mean that they're pro-Israel.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. If you like that one, click right here to watch the full SOSCAST. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.